my guest. Her name is Andrea Purin. She is the eldest daughter of Roger and Carolyn Purin, and I do believe I'm getting that last name right. We'll see. I haven't struck out yet this week, folks. She says she has four sisters: Nancy, Christine, Cynthia, and April. She was born in October of 1958, and the only one of five siblings to be born in Rhode Island. She was just 2 months old when her parents bought their first home in William Dack, I guess, Connecticut, where all of her sisters came into the world. A family required more space, so they wound up. And let me just tell you, this is like set up where she's talking, in this bio it says, I am the eldest daughter. So I've got to switch it around as I tell you about her. So keep that in mind here. So I'm doing the best I can. So anyways, they needed more space and required a bigger house. So they bought a larger home in Cumberland, Rhode Island. She says when she was 6, living in a suburb of Providence proved disquieting. After 6 years, her mother decided her and the girls required a place in the country in which to grow and thrive. Well, in June of 1970, she found a glorious farm. And, then her and her father and siblings moved mountains to buy what was known as the Arnold Estate. 200 acres of land with a big barn and a farmhouse. Plenty of space to spread out and explore nature. It was the perfect place to raise a family, she says. According to the owner, it was a perfect place as well, though he failed to disclose a crucial element of the experience he endured as an occupant. She says, the day we moved in, he told my father, leave the lights on at night. A rather cryptic message. Now, I got to say, if I've just bought a home from you and you hand me the keys and you tell me keep the lights on at night, you're not leaving until we have a conversation. I want to know why you said that. Anyways, thus began an incredible odyssey, a supernatural excursion through dimensions of time and space, as the history of its characters from the ages began to reveal themselves to seven mortals who could not conceive of and never anticipated such events transpiring in their lives. So they had quite an ordeal in that house, and I'm looking forward to talking to her about it. I apologize, folks, but the bio was, it was kind of like her talking. So I had to switch it around to me talking. But she's supposed to call in a few minutes, but I might just go ahead and give it a shot here and see if I could just bring her on now, because we're close enough. But she was on the road tonight too, so hopefully everything works out well. Let's see. So I'm going to get around with us now, and we'll talk about this. I couldn't imagine living in a house with that kind of, it's one thing to have ghosts. It's another thing. I don't think what she had was ghosts. I think they were much worse than that. And I am putting in the wrong number. So, we've talked to Bill Bean in the past, and he went through quite an ordeal in Maryland. And I'll tell you now, he's a very, very spiritual man. So it definitely turned him around. I wonder what it's done for Andrea. And we'll find out in just a minute, because I'm calling her now. George Norrie must love having those people doing all that stuff for him.
Hello?
Hello, Andrea. This is Michael
Hello.
Vera with Late Night in the Midlands. How are you?
I'm very well, Michael. How are you, dear?
I am doing fine, and I hope you're ready to roll.
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
all
Do you want
right.
to call me on a landline, or do you feel that the connection's good with my cell phone?
Right now, it sounds great. So unless we have a problem, unless you want to switch, that's totally up to you.
Nope, this is fine. Let me give you the other number, just in case, for any reason
well,
we were,
well, hold on. We're on the air now, so don't do that. But I already have.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hi.
Well, hello.
Yes, let me not give my phone number out on the air.
Yeah, absolutely. I had to cut in there. That's about the only time I'll get rude and interrupt.
Bless your heart. How are you tonight?
I am doing fine, and I want to thank you so much for taking time out to be with us tonight.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I watched the movie. I don't know, it might have been 2 months ago now, and I'll tell you, wow, what a movie! And I'm looking forward to getting into this with you tonight. And I thought maybe we could start out with you giving a little bit of background and maybe giving us the story.
Well, let me tell you, I do not want to rupture your bubble. I don't, and I understand why you enjoyed the movie. I'm sure many millions of people have, based on the turnout at the theaters worldwide to see it. It is predominantly fiction. The real story is much more intense than anything that they even attempted to depict on screen. And the portrayal of Bathsheba Sherman is virtually fully fictionalized. From the year that she supposedly killed her child in 1863, when the real Bathsheba was already close to being an elderly woman, certainly for her time was an elderly woman. She was born in 1812. So the depiction of her as a witch, and there's no proof anywhere that Bathsheba was a practicing witch. That was all based on rumor and innuendo. However, I will give you the other side of the coin, Michael. Okay. Mrs. Warren walked into our kitchen blind, did not know when she and Ed came the first time to investigate what was happening at the farm. She had no idea of any of the history, any personalities, past or present, that were attached to the property. And when she came in the kitchen, she said, "I sense a malignant presence. Her name is Bathsheba." Wow. So that's where that comes from in the film, because the film is based on the case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren. I did provide a great deal of substantive information to the producers. Of course, I wanted it to be as authentic as possible, and yet there's not a single scene in the film that comes directly from the books, because they decided that the whole real true story that's written in the books was far too intense for society at large. And for the first time, I think, in Hollywood history, they toned down a movie instead of building it up to be more than it was.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've heard of plenty of cases where they've added things into a movie to make it more scary or more dramatic. I've never heard of them toning it down. So then you must have had one hell of an ordeal.
Well, the producers said that the actual true story was literally unbelievable, that they couldn't portray it as being based on a true story if they actually produced it as it was. And I can't imagine what CGI exists. I can't imagine what process might exist that would be able to actually duplicate what we saw in the house. It was really beyond imagination. I tried to describe it to the best of my ability in the actual books, but, you know, in the big picture got it right. You know, The Conjuring is an extraordinary film. I think of it as an art film, not as a horror film. I didn't find a single scene of that film to be in any way horrifying. In some ways, I found it very emotional, sometimes very disturbing, particularly when Lily Taylor is on her knees, trembling with the match in her hand, screaming my name to come help her, because that did happen.
Wow. You know, and when I watch a movie like that, what I try to do is I try to put myself in that situation. And, you know, I love true stories. Those are my favorite. And I'll tell you, it was very intriguing. It kept me on the edge of my seat the entire time. And I thought, wow, can you imagine literally going through that? Now, I've been in a haunted house where I've been messed with by ghosts, but never actually seen them. You know, I couldn't imagine an apparition just appearing in the room
What do you
like
think
that.
your fascination is, Michael? If you actually haven't seen a ghost, sorry, I'm going into my interviewer mode here. If you haven't actually seen a ghost, what is it that compels you to the supernatural? What's the attraction?
The attraction is knowing what comes after this.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
what it's
Bingo.
all about.
You get the gold star.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's why anybody who pursues any interest in the paranormal or supernatural is trying to verify for themselves, in my opinion, that there is indeed something beyond our mortal existence. And that is reason enough to explore it.
Exactly. I mean, that's what drives me. It's just to know for sure. I mean, how satisfactory would that be when you do get to your deathbed to just, you know, yeah, people have told you their stories and there's so much good evidence towards it, but, you know, there's nothing like seeing to believe it.
Well, I had the privilege of that happening to me, and a lot of people are right now going, poor word choice, Andrea. No, it was a privilege to see a full-body apparition at the age of 12 years old. I began to process that notion immediately, and I realized in short order that there is something beyond our mortal existence. To this day, I cannot tell you exactly what it is, but it is, and that's what matters.
And now, if I got this right, it's been a little while since I've watched the movie, but if I got this right, then the entities that were showing up in that home, they actually at one time lived there. They had a history there on that property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and my mother always thought that that was the case. She said right from the inception, when she started to identify the activity in the house, that these were not simply spirits that were passing through the property, that they were somehow attached to it, that it somehow belonged to them, and that the only way that we would ever identify them, and because they were numerous spirits, you know, we wanted to identify who we were either witnessing or interacting with. And so she began about a 2-year journey where she lived in dusty archives and, you know, visited town halls, went all the way to Worcester, Massachusetts, went as far south as Providence, dug up all the records, the death records, the birth certificates, everything that she could find about people that were in any way attached to the Arnold estate, which prior to that was the Richardson estate. The Richardson family is the ones that built it and finished it as it is now in 1736. So, you see, when we moved in there, 8 generations of one extended family had lived and died on that property. And my mother was quite certain that some of them had never left. And so what she did was she began an ordeal, a very painstaking process of piecing together this extremely elaborate puzzle. And in doing so, she was able, I think, to identify some of the spirits that lived in that house and some that died in that house, and for whatever reason did not move on. But one of the things that we found out that was so interesting is that most of the spirits had either died traumatically or very suddenly and did not seem to know that they were dead, or the other ones had died by their own hands. And so there were several spirits that we interacted with in that house that had claimed their own lives. And, you know, I can only speculate about it, but I think that the notion of suicide, committing suicide, even to this day, is so taboo. It's so frowned upon in terms of, you know, religious doctrine and dogma. It is, you know, think about how indoctrinated into that thought, that mindset people were 200 years ago, 250 years ago. It was flat out a sin to kill yourself. If you did, you were going to burn in hell for eternity. So I speculate that some of the spirits in the house are staying there because they're afraid to cross over, because they were told that they will not go to the light, that they will instead be enveloped by the darkness. And so it is safer and it is more predictable to remain in some way in this realm and earthbound.
Hey, that is about the best explanation I think I've ever heard, as far as why some of these entities are stuck in homes or buildings or what have you. That makes a lot of sense. They've killed themselves, and they're afraid to cross over because they've been told they're going to burn in hell.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right. And if they were fearful enough, really, Michael, what it all comes down to, all of it comes down to fear. I mean, can you imagine an emotion being so powerful that you feel it after you die?
Oh, God.
That's what would have to be in place for that hypothesis to be plausible.
Yeah, that's pretty scary to think about. I mean, really, because I've joked around several times about, well, when I die, I hope that I don't want things, and then you can't have them. And
right.
I kind of see some of these ghosts as maybe that's the case. They don't want to leave things or attached to them in some way.
Well, and I think that there are many benign spirits that remain attached in one form or another. I have numerous encounters on a regular basis with passed on family members. I tell my mother I get to visit with her sister and her brother far more frequently in their death than I ever got to in life. The other day I was just dusting the antique organ in our parlor, and I felt my Uncle John, who passed away about a month ago, just came right beside me, and I knew it was him instantly because he wore the same cologne for 58 years. So I knew it was him because of the times I tucked my head into his neck and smelled him as much as I held him. So, those moments are so precious to me. They're so comforting to me. I don't understand why anybody would be afraid of something like that. I can't even comprehend it.
Well, I guess it's not that I would be afraid of. It's the ones that show up and they look like undertakers, and they're standing at the end of your bed. Now, I've talked with, I don't know if you're familiar with Bill Bean, but he grew up in a home in Maryland, and it had demonic entities in it. And I mean, his stories, I couldn't imagine waking up in the middle of the night and here's this undertaker looking character with black eyes standing at the end of the bed. I think I'd have a heart attack. So, well,
if that's the angel of death come upon you, then that would be bad.
Yeah.
That would be bad. Yes, no, I don't know Bill Bean personally, but I have heard some of his tales from the crypt, as it were.
Yeah.
And, I have to say that I think that he would agree with me completely when I make the comment that once you are touched by spirit, it's a gift that you cannot return. I say that to people all the time because I want it to sink into their consciousness. Once you are touched by spirit, it is a gift you can never return. Now, you can turn your back on it. You can pretend that it doesn't exist. But the fact is that once the third eye has been pried wide open or has been gracefully opened with just sheer acceptance, however it happens, when it happens, nothing is ever the same again, ever. You never think about things in life. The world ceases to be three-dimensional, and it becomes multi-dimensional. And the earth ceases to be the earth. It becomes part of the cosmos in a way that integrates it with everything. It changes your mindset, your frequency, your vibration, the wavelength on which you think, on which you project your thoughts. Once you go there, once you have been touched by spirit, and you know there's no mistaking it for something else, when that happens, everything changes.
And, you know, I have to agree with you 100% because I've had some experiences of my own. One was a haunted apartment that I lived in, but the real one that did it for me was a visit from my mother who passed away. And it was real.
Oh, I'm so sorry you lost your mom, honey. I'm so sorry.
Well,
But you know you didn't really lose her. You do know that. Please tell me you know she's still with you.
Oh, absolutely. I know it. I know that when I'm done here on this planet, I'll see her again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, but it was very real, and I had confirmation that it was real because there was things she told me that came true the days to follow. So, you know, that was my confirmation for it all. So I knew I didn't lose my mind. And for me, that did a lot. And when she came, she did tell me, she says, tell your father there is a God. So, you know, for those people who say it's demons coming and they're just trying to look like your relatives, well, this demon told me that there's a God. So it's just, you know,
there is absolutely a God. I don't think anybody should, well, you know.
Yeah.
Even atheism is a belief system. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and as I say,
if you believe that there's no God, then that's a belief system. But I know from personal experience that there is something absolutely divine. There is a divine spark. It's the stuff that holds the molecules of the universe together and causes the rotation of the planets. It is divine mind. It is intelligence, infinitesimal intelligence that we cannot even begin to understand. But I personally feel very much a part of it, and I believe that all of us are. And I have a very close friend, my co-host, George Lopez, who's on A World Awakening, our radio show. We do this together, and I tell him all the time, we need to be the light we seek. We need to reaffirm for not only ourselves, but for everyone, that we are the eyes of God on this planet. And we are the heart and mind and spirit and soul of the great creator, whatever it is. I don't think of it as male or female. I think of it as it.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of always looked at it as the universe. I mean, it's just always expanding. It's ever so powerful, and it gives life. I mean, so I think that it's so big we could never see it all. Our human mind could never comprehend it all. It's just
that's absolutely correct.
Yeah. So fascinating.
And I don't think that we're supposed to comprehend it all, Michael.
No,
I love calling you Michael because I think of the Archangel, and I think that's also one of my favorite movies and one of my favorite names. I've had so many Michaels in my life, so I have to you're never going to be Mike to me, not ever. You know, but I have to say that one of the things that I find most compelling about life itself is the mystery of it, how every single day holds magic. All you have to do is just accept it and unleash the potential of it, because every decision that you make, from the most mundane to the most profound, changes your life inexorably from that moment on. When you begin, and I don't say you, when anyone begins to live completely present in the moment, practicing the presence as part of God consciousness, when that happens, it changes your vibration. It begins to project your thoughts in a way that are far more powerful. What happens is you go through a dramatic conversion where you start living life instead of letting life live you. It's a 180. It is a remarkable connection and conversion. When it occurs, it's the most empowering aspect of the human spirit. And that's what had to happen to each and every member of our family in order for us to stay at the farm for 10 years, in order for us to have the experiences that we did. And when people ask me the most obvious question, what is wrong with your family that you stayed in that house for a decade? Mm-hmm. You know, and the answer to it, there are 100 different answers to that question. But the most important answer is that whatever conspired to take us to that farm, likewise conspired to keep us there for as long as it took for us to learn our lessons well. And my mother said a few years ago, as I was debating whether or not to continue with the writing of the story, finding it very emotionally difficult, she said, "This is not the kind of story that one should rightfully take to the grave. We've waited more than 30 years. The world has caught up to what happened to us. Tell the story."
Yeah, I agree. You know, and it's funny that you say that, because I was going to suggest that somehow people in your situation were kept in the home, because Bill Bean did the same thing. His family was there for 10 years.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, and I think that that's an interesting connection between Bill and myself. And, you know, I'm sure at some point in our travels, since we do a lot of the same events, we're bound to run into each other. And at that point, I'm sure we will have a conversation about not only the complexities of what we both endured, but also the similarities.
Yeah, because you know, I know in talking to Bill, he's a pretty good friend. I've had him on for years. I've brought him back on the show, and you know, his life was changed because of that. And you know, he actually finds the good in it. So for what he's gone through, and you know, sometimes I guess we got to learn our lessons the hard way. I would definitely call that the hard way. So why don't we start with your story? Why don't we tell, for people who might not be familiar with it, maybe a little bit about, you know, how it all began and when the activity first started and how old you were. And,
okay, I'll give you the best synopsis that I can come up with. Keep in mind that the trilogy is 1,500 pages, so I will condense and compress it to the best of my ability.
Thank you.
Volume 1 begins approximately a year and a half before we actually moved to the farm. The reason that it does is because an entire series of events occurred precisely the way that they had to in order for my mother to come to the conclusion that she wanted to move her 5 little girls out of the suburbs of Providence and into a country home. Out a place in the country is the name of the first chapter. And that first 60 pages or so not only introduces you and familiarizes you with every member of the family, but on top of that, it really delineates point by point the series of unfortunate events which occurred, which prompted my mother to seek another place for us to live. One of the things that is most pertinent to that first chapter is the fact that approximately a year and a half before my mother found the farm, my father came home with a puppy one day, and she was a very rare breed of dog, an African Basenji. They have pointed ears and curly tails, and they don't bark, they yodel. And she was the most precious thing that I had ever seen in my life. I fell madly in love instantly, and so did my mother, and she swept her up from the ground and held her close to her throat and her neck and on her chest and cuddled this dog and said, "This is a very special dog. She deserves a very special name." And she looked up to the sky and she closed her eyes, and when she opened her eyes, she said Bathsheba. And that was the name of our dog, who was violently killed at the intersection of Mohawk Street and Diamond Hill Road in Cumberland. One of the last things that occurred before my mother said, "No more. That's it. We're out of here."
What happened to the dog? Run over?
You're just going to have to read the book, honey. I mean, I thought you wanted the synopsis.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to move on from here. Okay, so we're all miserable. We're all unhappy. I'm doing things that are completely out of character for me as an individual, even at the tender age of 10 years old, which was that I beat the kid that killed my cat to a pulp. Now, this is another animal that we lost. Totally, I mean, I am the pacifist of all pacifists. So my mother knew that there was a real problem. and that I stalked him for 3 days was also slightly problematic as well. And she did not like the change she saw in her eldest around this murder of her cat. So, all of these things transpired, and my mother decided that she wanted to move us, and my father was adamantly opposed. She took me to a flute lesson in June of 1970, and while she was waiting for my hour-long lesson, she picked up a newspaper. She didn't even read it. She brought it home, threw it on the kitchen counter. That night, she opened it, and there was an advertisement in it that she said leapt from the page into her eyes, into her mind, into her consciousness, and at 9:30 at night, which in 1970 is the height of rude, she called the real estate agent and looked at the house the next morning and emptied the family bank account of everything except enough money for milk and bread. For while my father was away on a business trip, he did not know that my mother had just signed away his entire future. And that's how we moved to the farm. The moment he found out, he had to be peeled off the ceiling, wanted to know how to get the earnest money back. And then my mother said, "You have to see this place." And so we all piled into the big old Bonneville, and we went up to Round Top Road in Harrisville, Rhode Island, and we all fell madly in love, and every single one of us felt like we'd lived there for 1,000 years, and we never wanted to go back to where we were living. It took 6 months for them to close the deal. On the day that we were moving in January of 1971, they closed in December. We moved after Christmas. On January 11th, 1971, we moved into the farmhouse. And I was the first one to grab a big box off the back of the truck. I walked into the parlor door, took a hard right into the dining room, saw a man standing in the corner of the room that was oddly dressed but seemed pleasant enough, had a quirky grin on his face. His leg was propped up against the wall. His arms were folded across his chest. I said, "Good morning." He didn't respond. I went into the kitchen and asked my mother who the other man was with Mr. Kenyon in the dining room, and she said, "What other man?" After her fourth daughter came in and said, "I saw this other man in the dining room with Mr. Kenyon." My sister Nancy came in and said, "That other man in that dining room just disappeared." And that was our first experience with the ghosts.
Wow. Now, what did Mom and Dad think about this?
Interestingly, I'm so glad you asked that question. Interestingly, all of his children could see this apparition, full-body apparition, but my father was standing 3 feet away from him and didn't see him at all.
Wow. Now, do you suppose that that these entities have the ability to be seen by who they want to be, or is it just that we get older and, you know, we're told that these things aren't real and our mind's closed to it, so we don't see it?
Michael, I think that that is far more likely the answer. I don't think that, I think that we are all born knowing that we're immortal souls. And I think that's why children take such inordinate risks in life, because they think that they simply are going to live forever. And the reason that they think that is because they are simply going to live forever. But they have to at some point come to the age of reason and consciousness and begin to appreciate this existence. And when they do, and when the fear factor kicks in and the red flags go up, this is safe activity, this is not, that's when they begin to come to terms with life as we know it, three-dimensional, based on 5 senses, and they start to lose the notion that they are immortal souls. But my contention is that, and I have some people who argue with me in the paranormal community about this, but my contention is that the veil is the illusion, that we create the veil, that every time a little 2-year-old comes, you know, toddling out of her room and says, "Grandma read me a bedtime story last night," and her mother says, "No, honey, that's not possible. Grandma died before you were born. I showed you pictures of Grandma," and the child says, "That's how I knew her." And Mom says, no, that was a dream. No, it was not a dream. It was a visitation. And so when you begin to, as the authority figure in a child's life, shut down the notion that there are spirits who are there to comfort them, guide them, protect them, look over them, as it were, and you start telling them that that's your imaginary friend, that was just a dream, that didn't really happen, honey. Eventually, because you are the only authority figure in their life, they believe you. And therein begins the building of the wall.
Yeah, I could see, and I'm glad I'm not like that with kids. I have a niece who and a nephew who claimed that they had an invisible friend, shall we say, and and I wanted to sit down and talk to them about it because you never know, and they're convinced. Well, one day the kid was taking a picture in the car with his DS. And in the picture, in the corner, there was an old man's face. Now, nobody in the car was an old man. It was just the mother and the two kids. And so that couldn't have been a reflection off no windows or anything. So I believe them. And I asked them now, do you still get visited by the old man? They tell me no. So I don't know. Maybe disappeared. Maybe needed a ride somewhere. I don't know. But, yeah, so I would never tell a kid that they're imagining it. If a kid comes to me and tells me there's a man standing in their room, well, take my hand, bring me in there, and let me see. And, you got to believe them. I do.
I do, too. I think that people should always believe children. That's when we are at our most honest in life.
Yeah, and
you learn to lie. That is a learned behavior. It's not intrinsic to our nature.
Well, this might be a good experiment. If there's a parent out there and they have their child coming to them saying, hey, there's somebody in my room or whatever, if you got a dog or a cat, bring the animal in the room. They'll
Absolutely, and I'll tell you why. There's so much more. Their heightened sensitivity and sensibility will tell you so much. If you think that you're having visitations, if you feel that there's a particular room that is inordinately active, stay in that room with an animal, and it will tell you everything. I had a number of experiences during the course of the writing of this trilogy. Some of them were very significant, and one of them was there's an important character in the books, and his name is Samuel Olafson, and he was our family attorney, but far more so a very close friend who we loved dearly. And my dog, Gracie Pearl, the 125-pound lap dog, is a Great Pyrenees. So she's white on white on white, just layers and layers of fur. And when something gets her ire up, she puffs up like a porcupine. She looks like she's 250 pounds instead of a 1 1/4. And one night while my mom and I were talking about the book and where I was going with the story and how I was organizing it, we were just chatting about it as we did constantly in pulling it together. I felt a presence in the room, and we had an old pink chair in the corner of the room, kind of rose-colored tapestry, and the cushion, the feather cushion in it, sunk deeply down, and Gracie Pearl puffed up like a white peacock and went over to the chair, sniffed the chair. The cologne in the room was absolutely unmistakable. It was Sam. He always wore the same exact cologne. That's usually how I identify spirits, like my uncle, for instance. And he stayed in that chair. Sam stayed in that chair, and Grace got up off the sofa. I hate to admit it, but she takes over the sofa, and walked over to the chair and put her head down to have the top of her head pat, and stood there, absolutely motionless, while the two of them communicated. And it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever witnessed in my life.
Fascinating. That's fascinating. You know, pets are so perceptive to
Incredibly
that type.
so.
Yeah.
Well, ours, when we moved to the farm, they refused to cross the threshold. They would not go in the house. The dog, the cat, they would not go in the house. They had to be dragged into the house.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So yeah, let's get back to that a little bit. So you and your sisters had seen this other man in the house, and obviously mom and dad say, no, you're imagining it or you're making it up. What happens?
No, they never, nobody accused us of making things up.
Oh, okay.
We were raised to be honest children, always forthright, and even though we would keep things from my father, we shared everything with my mother. So it wasn't a matter of doubting us. It was a matter of that day was chaos, and there were probably 24 people bringing things in and out of the house, and the beds were being set up upstairs, and it was madness. And it was also in the midst of a swirling ice and snow event. Right after we were finished unloading the truck, Mr. Kenyon asked my father to go for a walk with him, which my dad thought was a little odd considering the inclement conditions, but, you know, being hardy Yankees, they went for it. And Mr. Kenyon reached over and touched my father's forearm, and he said, Roger, for the sake of your family, leave the lights on at night. And that's all that he said to my dad pertaining to the house. And my father, of course, thought big, huge, vacuous house, 5 little girls, 1 bathroom, 1st floor, and they're all on the 2nd. Better leave some lights on so the kids can navigate their new space. But that's not what he was referring to. And a couple of months later, he came over one afternoon, and my mother said, Earl, you know, we're hearing very strange noises in the house. And he winked at my mom, and he said, swallows in the chimney, my dear, swallows in the chimney. And that told me in that moment that that's how he justified the experiences that he had in the many decades that he and his wife shared that home that she had inherited through the Arnold family. Wow. We found out in subsequent months from the people, we didn't really have neighbors per se. When you cannot see somebody's home, you can't really call them a neighbor. But down the road and up the road, there were other places. And as we got to know the kids and the families that were around us in that neck of the woods, we found out from their parents that there was never a time that you could drive past that farmhouse at night that it was not lit up like a Christmas tree, and every single light in the house was on.
Sometimes
all night long.
Sometimes having the lights on could be just as scary if they, you know, the entity turns them off on you.
Yes.
Did you ever
yes,
experience
you're right
that?
about that.
Yeah.
Well, we had, but see, that, some people consider that a big deal. That was such a commonplace part of our lives that it was negligible.
Yeah.
You know, to have, I mean, we had day-to-day encounters within the 2nd or 3rd night that we were in the house. My sister Cindy came and crawled in bed with me, and she said, Annie, I hear voices in my room. I asked her, of course, what was happening, and she said, there are voices all around my bed, and they're all talking at once, and they're all saying the same thing together. And I asked her what that was, and she said, there are 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall. There are 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall. And they would say it over and over and over again. And when she got to the point where she couldn't stand it anymore, she would come crawl into bed with me. So for all intents and purposes, at night, Cindy shared a bedroom with me.
Wow. So was there dead soldiers in the wall?
Well, we don't know, because after we left, that wall, and I don't know why they chose that one particularly, but that wall was sealed shut.
Wow.
The entrance to the eaves was sealed.
I see. I'm surprised somebody didn't take a look. Now, see, that would freak me out. Yeah, I'd be sleeping in the bed with you, too, because that would have freaked me out. Now,
you would have crawled in bed with me, too? Did you just say that live on the air?
I should.
Really, Michael? I would have kicked you right out.
Yeah.
Right out. You'd have been gone. You'd have been on your own. Man up.
Well, not if I was your little sister.
I know, not my little sister was, of course, welcome in bed with me. In
Yeah.
fact, I woke up with numerous sisters in bed with me from time to time.
So, did they get violent at any point? I mean,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, towards my mother. Actually, and towards Cindy, too. My little sister, Cindy, she's the fourth of the five of us, was, she had major surgery when she was 2 months old, and for all intents and purposes, she passed and was brought back. And we've always believed as a family that she came back a very old, wise soul. And consequently, since for all intents and purposes, she has touched the face of God and then turned back to be an earthbound soul, she has an inordinate capacity and ability to connect. And she was the one of everyone in the house that was visited most frequently. Even more so than my mother, far more so than my mother. However, the entity that was after my mother had her own agenda, as it were, and made it very clear to my mother that she was not wanted in the house, that she was basically told in the form of an incantation, having just a momentary lapse here. 'Twas mistress once afore ye came, and mistress here will be again. We'll drive ye out with fiery broom, we'll drive ye mad with death and gloom. It goes on for 8 stanzas, and was retrieved through hypnosis from my mom.
Wow. Wow. So, as this went on, when did your parents finally come to the understanding that there was absolutely something going on in the house, and how did it affect the family? I understand a lot of times in these cases, if they're dark energies, especially, that the parents start fighting. They kind of try to like create havoc within the home.
Yes, and that's what happened, and the reason that it happened is because as soon as a sigh came flying out of the east of the barn and struck my mother on the neck, she knew that that was something that should not have happened, that it defied the forces of gravity because she saw it coming at her, spinning like a boomerang, which meant that there was some force or velocity behind it that launched it. It had perfect aim and struck the side of her throat. And the only thing that saved her was my father's leather flight jacket. That was within 2 weeks of moving into the farm. Once she started putting it together, when she opened the fireplace in the parlor in April of the first year in 71, literally all hell broke loose in the house. There was apparently some spiritual objection to changing something about the house. And when she did that, it seemed to change the entire vibration of the place. And when she did that, she was attacked first in the closet of the bathroom with a very large, heavy coat hanger, and was beaten around the head and neck repeatedly. When my father came home 2 or 3 days later from another business trip, and my mother lowered the shoulder of her robe to show my father the damage done, he told her flat out that he did not believe her.
Wow.
That was impossible. And yes, it was impossible. And at one point, she got in his face and said, "The spirits don't give a damn whether you believe in them or not. Their existence isn't predicated upon it." And all it did was alienate them and alienate them and alienate them, because he simply refused to accept. He said, there's got to be a logical explanation. There's got to be a logical explanation. Well, there is a logical explanation. We have ghosts. That's the explanation.
Now, would you...
The chasm grew and grew. I mean, they were separated in heart long before they were actually divorced.
would you consider these ghosts? Would you consider them demons, demonic? Were they?
No, and I don't even go there because I don't know what a demon is.
Well,
I
don't
really
either.
don't. I do know that my mother was attacked. There was no exorcism in our house ever. And what did occur did not happen in the cellar. It happened in the dining room. Contrary to our depiction in the film, we were all born and raised Catholic. We were all baptized and confirmed into the church. And when we were at a point of crisis, our priest turned his back on us. The church turned its back on us. We never walked away from it deliberately. I understand for the purposes of dramatic license why they would try to juxtapose the godless heathen Perrins with the devoutly Catholic Warrens, but that was simply not the case. We were very faithful. All of us were deeply spiritual and truly connected to God through nature. All of us were very kind and loving and genuine little children. That's how our mother raised us.
And so at some point then, investigators come in, and that would be the Warrens, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, it was. They came to the house, I think, 5 or 6 times. I'm not quite sure. And I know that my parents went out to their house in Monroe, Connecticut one time, which is, to my knowledge, the only time that they were able to audio tape my mother, because every time they tried to tape or film anything at the farm, it all came out blank.
Wow. That's fascinating. So they were able to manipulate any camera use as well. They
Yes.
don't want no pictures.
At the farm, you have to ask permission. The only time that I take photographs at the farm is after I have asked permission to do so.
I see.
And then they give me all I want and then some.
So now what happened when the Warrens got there? What were they doing, and how did these entities react to their being there? And where's the doll come in too? I remember a doll. What was the doll all about?
Oh, the doll had absolutely zero to do with our story, less than zero. That was a manipulation of the screenwriters to integrate the 2 stories into one, but they were absolutely separate and distinct and had nothing to do with one another.
Oh, okay.
That was the doll that the nurses surrendered to Mrs. Warren. What the doll they called Annabelle, who was actually Raggedy Ann.
Yeah,
the perfectly benign-looking Raggedy Ann, but of course they couldn't use that for the film, so they created this like Chucky-esque little girl doll that was gruesome in nature.
Yeah, because I noticed in the movie it showed that Mr. Warren had, it seemed like he'd collect something from every...
It wasn't him, it was his wife who did that.
Okay.
It wasn't him that did that.
And would they try to, I guess, find what these entities would be attached to and then take that out of the home? Is that what they're...
I'm guessing that was their hypothesis, yes, that there were things that were attached to these different items, and that the only way to get the entity to leave the home was to take the item. And unfortunately, my mother voluntarily surrendered the use of all of her historical documents, all of her sketches of the entities, all of her writing about her experiences in the house, surrendered that very large volume of material to Mrs. Warren in 1973, and she never got it back.
Oh, darn. So then what happened from there on, from the time the Warrens got there? I mean, were you able to clear it out, or was moving out the only solution?
There was no clearing that house.
No.
There is no clearing that house. And I don't care who says what about that. You can listen to me and trust what I'm telling you. My uncle Eugene was a brother of the Sacred Heart who served the Pope directly. And in 1974 before he came to the United States for his last visit prior to his passing. He came every few years from the Vatican to see all of his family from Canada all the way down to about New Jersey. We were spread everywhere. And my father wouldn't tell him anything about what was happening at the house, but my mother did. And about 6 weeks after he returned to Italy, a big black Mercedes sedan pulled into the yard, and a holy man, a priest, stepped out of it. And I mean to tell you, Michael, this man glowed. He glowed. My mother gave him immediate access to the house, immediate entry without him so much as introducing himself. He asked if he could walk the house. He was an exorcist. And he came and went room by room by room by room, and would pause in each one we could hear because of the different distinct sounds of the floorboards. And when he was done, he came down the stairwell from my bedroom into the parlor where he had left my mother, and said to her, "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Perrin, this house cannot be cleansed." And with that, he bid her adieu, and my mother went into the bathroom and wept. She knew that was her last best hope. Just knew it.
Wow. Well, hang on with us for a moment. We'll leave it right there, and then we'll pick it back up after this break. Yes, Andrea Perrin, and we're talking about The Conjuring. This is a true story, folks, and while, as the guest has said, not everything was exactly as the movie. As a matter of fact, the real ordeal was much more frightening.
It was much more frightening than the movie. It really was, Michael. And I'll tell you something. People who were previewing this film out in Hollywood, California last year at this time were leaving the theater, and the executive producer called me and he said, "Andrea, people are walking out of the movie." And I said, "Oh, no, I had not seen it yet. And I didn't know what had gone wrong." And he said, "No, you don't understand. This is a good thing. What's happening is that their imaginations are running wild, and they are pre-dreading what is going to happen to the children, and that's why they're leaving. They don't want to see anything happen to the family."
Wow. And I tell you, I really do feel sorry for people who have to go through that kind of thing. But again, these movies like this, true stories. I just try to put myself in that place, and I don't think I ever could. Because
it's not something that you would want to experience. It really isn't. I mean, there were, my mother was stabbed in the side of her hip with a tomato stake that went to the bone. Really severe injuries. I have a YouTube channel, and one of the interviews that's on the YouTube channel is done by my producer, Les Anderson. And it's an interview with my mother, at which point my mother says, I thought once I realized that there were spirits in the house, I didn't think that they could hurt us. But I was wrong about that.
Wow. And now, how much injury did these spirits actually cause to you, the children?
Give me a moment to think about that question. That's a good question.
Okay.
It depends, I guess, on your definition of the word injury.
Well, I guess.
Is that an all-encompassing definition that would include psychological injury, emotional injury, physical injury?
Absolutely. All the above. I would
Everything,
think that the physical injury.
Then every one of us was hurt.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think what it would do psychologically would probably be the most damage, wouldn't it?
The psychological injury to me was my incredible worry for my mother. I never had an altercation with any of the spirits in the house. The spirits loved me. They made it abundantly clear that they loved me. When they manifested in my presence, it was always a loving manifestation. I always felt a sense of family. And the most poignant encounter that I ever had in the house personally was the day that I came home from college to celebrate my 18th birthday over the Columbus Day weekend. And when I did, I stood in front of the fireplace to get warm. I was inordinately cold when I came into the house, and I had forgotten the difference between cold and supernatural cold. I should have anticipated a manifestation, but I didn't until I backed up to the fireplace and was practically standing inside it and could not get warm. And that's when I realized my father noticed the spirit, and then everyone else. They were all sitting at the dining room table. I was standing on the hearthstone. And my father said, "Annie, someone's come to welcome you home." And I turned my head and I looked into what was a mirror image reflection of myself as an old woman dressed in 17th century garb. And in that moment of epiphany, I realized that I had lived at least once and probably numerous times before as some extended member of that family. And that if I did not do my job this time around, which was to tell their story and do it well, that I would be destined to return to that house. And I never want to go back there. And when I die this time, I want to ascend.
I see. Wow. So then you believe that you've had some history in that house in a past life.
And believe that it's entirely possible that the reason that my family was drawn to that house was to get me there.
Because I was going to ask why such the loving feeling towards the child, but not the parents. Because I don't know, if it was me, I think I would want to know, well, if you love me so much, can you spare my mother, please? But they didn't. I don't
think I rationalized it at that point.
Yeah.
I think that I felt more defensive than anything else, more protective and more defensive around my mother, and I would chastise them after an incident that startled or scared her or that hurt her.
Do you think that it's kind of weird asking it this way, but do you think that they made you feel that way? I mean, not like, hey, that normal feeling, but that they...
No, nobody makes me feel any way. Nobody does, dead or alive. That was an absolute pure response to my own anger at whoever it was that was tormenting my mother. My sister Cindy, interestingly, felt that same kind of protective and nurturing attitude toward Mom, and she decided to take matters into her own hands once with her friend Lori. And they had a little seance of their own up in the boarding room that was directly off my bedroom. And they had a very rude awakening when they realized that what they had beckoned was far more powerful than two little girls playing with fire. And they were both, well, according to my mother, disobedient heathens get what they deserve.
Wow. So, and the church would have nothing to do with coming to try to do an exorcism of the house or anything like that. I thought they would jump on something like that, but apparently not.
No, in the Catholic hierarchy, everything begins with the parish priest. And because our priest was so frightened, this was not something that he, and certainly had no belief in. He would not have referenced our case any higher than our own parish. And he is the one that actually approached my father and suggested that our family worship elsewhere. And we never went back to church. We didn't go back to a Catholic church or any other kind of church. We went into the woods.
Wow. Well, hallelujah to him. Nice guy. I'll tell you. So things got pretty bad. How did they play out? What wound up happening? Did your parents wind up selling the house again, or I don't remember quite.
My mother told my father in 1979 that she would not survive another winter in the house. She was honest. He believed her. and they put the house on the market where it languished for 6 months without so much as a single phone call or a viewer. And after that, they took it off the market, and my mother again reiterated the critical nature of her request. And my father went to the abutting landowner and in Massachusetts and cut him a very sweet deal for the farm and the barn and the property.
I see. Now I understand that nowadays, people who do live there, are there people living there? Don't they have a problem with trespassers? And
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
It's probably best that I not go there
Yeah.
because I'm very angry about that situation, and I'm in a really good space in mind right now, and I don't want to get on a rant.
Okay, that's fair enough. So, but there are people who live in the home now.
Yes.
Okay. And I guess you wouldn't know if anybody before you or after you has had any kind of experiences?
I do know a great deal, but because of an ongoing controversy about that, as the current owner is now saying after 28 years of having the house investigated, that there are no ghosts and there never were, which calls into question our entire history in that house, to the knowledge of multiple people in town at the time. Because of that flash, as it were, I will respectfully defer to her telling whatever story suits her at the moment.
I see. And, and it's understandable that some people, it's my understanding anyways, that some people can move into a home and not experience anything, while yet another family could move in after them. And then, it's like the entities decide who or what.
Yes, and that is true. What you're saying is absolutely true, but in this particular instance, that was not the case.
Mm-hmm. And certainly renovations will get them riled up too. And I like what you said earlier about how changing things in the home changes the vibration. And they might not like that, because I guess if you change the vibration, then they feel like insecure, like they might have to leave, that kind of thing, or it's not on the same vibration with them no more. So they get angry. They don't want it changed.
I don't know. I'd like to be able to answer that question for you definitively, but I don't know. I think that they just don't like the disruption, and to them, it's their house. And that's why I get so upset with investigative groups that will go into a residence and provoke the spirits. I find that incredibly, incredibly disrespectful. It was their house first, and the mortals that are dwelling in it now are really their guests for all intents and purposes. So it seems to me that in order, the only way to approach a spirit is in the spirit of compassion. The only way to connect and really have a meaningful encounter with spirit is to approach it from pure love. And that includes the evil spirits, anybody that is exhibiting behavior that would be considered mean-spirited or aggressive. I have a perfectly normalized relationship with Bathsheba. She appreciates the fact that I told her story and told it well, and did so in a very even-handed way. And she is very upset about her portrayal in the film, and I understand that, but she was a very vain woman in life, and you would be amazed at what's upsetting her about the film. Not that she was represented as a witch, but that a man played her in the film.
Oh.
She acted up in a big way on the set the day that our family went, and it was all captured on film.
And out of curiosity, what was it? Why is it so important to this entity to get her story out? And I wonder why I'm asking this is because, I mean, how many others are just like her that might want a story out, and they're just hanging around and waiting for somebody to do what they want, and maybe
You
they.
know what, Michael? They just want to be acknowledged.
Mhm.
They want to be acknowledged. They are sharing multiple realms with us simultaneously, and they pull what energy they can from whatever source is available to them in order to manifest at whatever level they can at any particular time. And when they do that, that is, in my opinion, a cry for notice. It's just begging to be noticed. What I tell people all the time, and I do these, long seminars and appearances and stuff all over the country, and occasionally I will gather with a group of people who are, truly like-minded, who are not coming at this with any kind of skepticism at all. And by the way, I absolutely welcome skepticism. It is what forwards the momentum of this movement, and it is a movement. However, the thing that I so enjoy about these smaller, more intimate gatherings is that you can talk to people who have been touched as well, who do know that the only way to initiate a truly meaningful expression with spirit is to embrace it, to accept your own mortal fear of it, whatever it may be, and to embrace your gift, because that's what it is. If it's a curse, it's likewise a blessing. It is both. That's why the books are titled House of Darkness, House of Light. It was both. My mother is the one that came up with the title, and that was her punctuating phrase after she spoke the title aloud. It was both. Because, you see, that's the nature of the universe, not just our lives, but all of the universe. There is balance. There is equity. That's how it works in tandem. And you cannot have pure goodness without some element of evil, because otherwise you would not recognize pure goodness for what it is.
That's very well
and then
said.
You would not have something to vanquish. Good always, always conquers evil.
That's very well said. And, I believe the same thing. And, I've always been under the impression that when somebody passes away, if they're a miserable SOB, then when they get to the other side, they're still that miserable SOB. And maybe that's what we mistaken for demonic entity.
Yes. I think that is a very perceptive observation on your part. I think that is absolutely true, and I do believe, based on my own personal observations, that when we die, there are elements, possibly all elements of our humanity, which are retained, including attitudes, predispositions, opinions, judgments, whoever it was, and I don't for a moment believe that it was Bathsheba Sherman. It was too late. Based on the verbiage that was used in the incantation, that was 1700s, not 1800s. The language that was used in it was archaic by the time Bathsheba lived. So I believe that it's much more likely that the spirit that was tormenting my mother was Mrs. John Arnold, who hanged herself in the barn at 93 years old. And who knows what was tormenting her, that she would claim her life, that she even had the physical capacity to climb up to the hayloft and to throw a noose over a beam that was suspended 40 feet in the air. I mean, how did that even happen? Was that a directive? There's no way of knowing that. But that's part of, coming full circle to what we were speaking about earlier. That's part of the mystery of life. That's what keeps us searching. The scientists will tell you that the universe is ever expanding. Well, so are we. And I'm not just talking about our waistlines. I'm talking about our consciousness. It is ever expanding. It is growing. And the only way to keep that process in play is to keep throwing new, interesting ideas and possibilities at it. Just consider the possibilities. And that's all that I ask of my readers. I say in my appearances around the country that I can't look at the crowd that's sitting in front of me and say, I want you to blanketly accept everything that I am saying to you. Because if I were sitting where you are listening to me and had not had these experiences, I don't know if I would believe it.
Yeah.
So how could I ever chastise someone for doubting? You know, doubt is intrinsic to faith. You cannot have one without the other. You simply cannot.
Very true. And, you know, I say this often. I wish that everybody can have an experience similar to what I've had, similar to what many people have had. I wish that everybody can have that, because I'll tell you, once you do, it's like taking that red pill. There's no going back.
Oh, a Matrix reference.
Yes.
That's very good. Oh, see, you're my new favorite interviewer now. Anybody that makes a Matrix reference, you are good with me. That is a fabulous film. Did you know, just to get off on a tangent for just a moment, and then I'll let you reel me back in and ask me another question, but did you know that the brothers that wrote the screenplay for that film did so on cocktail napkins in a cafe?
Really? No, I did
not know
that.
The whole idea and the whole film is based on their mental conjurings around the phrase déjà vu. Where does it come from? What causes it? That was the entire premise. And then on a series of 20, 25 cocktail napkins, they drafted out the entire screenplay and then went home and wrote it.
Well, I love the Matrix movies, and I think they say a lot about where we are in this world right now.
Yes, they do. And where we're going if we don't do something to turn it around. You know, Michael, I know you want to talk about the movie, and I know you want to talk about the books, but I need to talk about some big ideas. I need to talk about the fact that if we do not use our minds in a positive and constructive way as a global society, that we are doomed to self-destruction. And if we don't start protecting our planet instead of destroying our planet, we are fouling our own nest, and we are the only creature on the planet that does so. When and if time comes that proclivity takes over the essential nature of us to want to protect and love and nurture, then we are doomed. And you know what? If we haven't got the capacity to go to other places to continue the species, the human species will die out, and it will be a self-inflicted wound.
I couldn't agree with you more. And trust me, I'm willing to go and anywhere in the conversation. And this is a good spot, because I believe that too. You know, I think about all the resources and the money that we have wasted killing each other. And if we just put that all together to maybe, I don't know, do something for humanity, like maybe find other planets and get to them. Because I think for humanity to survive, we're going to have to at some point spread out. Maybe we already have and we don't know it.
We don't have to spread out. All we have to do is treat this planet with respect. All we have to do is manage our population. All we have to do is make sure that everyone on this globe is fed properly. We throw away enough food in the United States every year to feed the whole rest of the world 5 times over.
Oh, I know it.
That's a sin. If there's such a thing as a sin, that's a sin.
I agree. And, you know, what I worry about, though, is that we've poisoned this planet so badly.
Oh, don't even get me going on Fukushima. Don't even get me going there, because you know what? Your show's not long enough.
Oh, I believe
you better redirect me now.
Okay, so, but yeah, you're right. And that's not the half of it. Not just Fukushima, but the Gulf oil spill.
The Gulf oil spill. Oh, see, now I'm going to have to go get my soapbox. You better stop.
That's
Dude,
quite...
Don't you want to talk about ghosts?
Oh, I'll talk about whatever you like. So,
really?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, I love when people put me in charge. That is so great. Okay, then you know what I want to talk about?
Sure.
Aliens.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. here's the deal. There's a difference between believing something and knowing something. When you believe something, you're taking it on faith alone. You don't have anything tangible or plausible that proves empirically that it exists other than in thought. And so that's where the entire notion of belief comes in. When you know something, there is no questioning it, and the evidence already exists. I know that this is an occupied planet, that it has been for millennia, and that if we are indeed created in the image and likeness of a divine creator, chances are it is possible and highly probable that our creator is actually an ancient alien life form.
And you will get no argument out of me about that. Not at all.
I love when you tell me things like that. He agrees with me completely. Yes, it's wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
See, you know, there are a lot of people that feel this way and think this way, and they don't dare say it. And the reason that they don't dare say it is the same reason that I didn't say it for the first 2 years that my books were out, and I was trying to keep separate and distinct the idea that I grew up in a haunted house from the notion that I have been impacted by extraterrestrial experiences as well, that I have seen things that are inexplicable and in my lifetime, and I'm not the only member of my family who has. My mother even said, don't go there, don't go there, don't go there. You want to be taken seriously. You don't want to go out. Well, you know what? 30, 40 years ago, talking about ghosts was just as taboo, just as bizarre, just as unbelievable, and nobody wanted to buy into the notion at all, and they certainly didn't want to have it discussed in polite company. It wasn't a subject that was brought up. Well, it is time that we face the fact that there is a cover-up that is being controlled by a handful of people on this planet that is working diligently to make sure that the rest of us don't know exactly what's going on, but some of us do know exactly what's going on, and some of us suspect and then have it proved to be true. Oh. So what I am saying is that it is time for us to change our minds about this entire subject and to stop being fearful about it, because there is nothing to fear. If they wanted to claim this globe, they could have done it a very, very long time ago. They are not here to hurt us. They are here to help us.
And, you know, and I would agree with you as far as the whole alien God thing. You know, when it comes to aliens, however, I do believe that they're probably just like humans in a sense that there's good and bad. So, you know, maybe there is some bad ones out there, but you're right. I say the same thing. If they really wanted to kill us, they could have done it a long time ago. Why wait until we keep coming up with new technologies? Why not just do it, you know, and get rid of us while they can? So
that's right.
Yeah. So definitely no argument here. I think that E.T. has had a hand in our being here for a very, very, very long time. And, you know, I know a lot of people don't like to talk about it because, you know, it goes against everything that they've been taught or believe. But the way I see it is this: if you're going to try to get the big picture and put that puzzle together, you have to consider everything. You can't stop on just because you were brought up a certain way or the Bible tells you a certain thing. You know, you still have to look outside the box because the answers aren't that cut and clear. You've got to search for them. And I think when you don't involve the UFO and alien phenomena in your research of getting the big picture, then you're never going to get the big picture, because I think they've got a lot to do with it.
Yes, I do too. And I still don't know how. I still haven't figured out how there is integration, but there is integration in everything. Everything is integrated with everything else. Everything is pertinent to everything else. Every life is significant to every other life. It somehow, it all works and fits together in tandem. And yet I suspect that we won't have, if we ever have a clear comprehension of it, it won't be while we're alive.
I agree with that also. And, you know, they've worked so hard at keeping it suppressed. And now with the internet, since the internet's been around, I mean, there's so much evidence. There's millions and millions and millions of people who've had sightings. I've had sightings. I've seen a mothership. I don't know what else to call it. Me and my wife seen a mothership together, and it was no more than maybe 800 feet in the air. And this thing was huge, and I seen it. So, and I've had other UFO sightings. And while some of it could be our government now, I don't believe it all is. And when you go back,
oh no,
yeah, you could go back like into the 1940s, 1950s. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot.
Well, do you think that there's this thing called reverse engineering?
Sure.
Which began, according to Paul Hellyer, the Right and Honorable Paul Hellyer, the former Defense Minister of Canada, and also Paula Harris, who is one of the preeminent authors and journalists regarding ufology. She and he together have both stated unilaterally that there is absolutely a connection between all the technology that we currently possess and the crashes at Roswell.
Right. Oh, and I do believe that we've reverse engineered. I sometimes speculate if the abductions people speak about, if our government doesn't have something to do with that.
I don't think the government has anything to do with that, and I don't think that they have any control over that. I think that what stymies the government is the fact that they really ultimately don't have control over it, and I think that the vast upper echelon of our government has absolutely no idea what's going on. I truly believe that this is all being controlled in a very specialized, very eyes-only, compartmentalized way. And the fact of the matter is, and I don't care who's listening, and I don't care who repeats it in print or in word, I resent that our government has considered us such plebeians, such idiots, that we are unable to wrap our minds around the notion, the truth, and the fact that this planet has been visited and is being visited from afar. And the thing that I find most insulting to my intelligence is that we're expected to buy lies like weather balloons. Nobody has bought that for 60 years, and yet they're still trying, like snake oil salesmen, to sell us a bill of goods. The fact of the matter is that the tall whites that have already been working closely with the United States Air Force have decided to target other people in terms of disseminating information, because agreements were long ago made and broken with the government of the United States in terms of disclosure. And what I am saying over and over in any venue that gives me voice, I demand full disclosure. And when they hear it from enough people, often enough, they're going to start finally, with the redacted nonsense, start releasing information. And maybe they feel that we're sheep and that we have to be spoon-fed this information. But the fact is that the human mind is much more sophisticated than that. And it is an insult to all living beings on this planet that this information is being withheld. And I will give all credit where credit is due to the United Kingdom, because about 6 months ago, they began releasing, through their own version of the Freedom of Information Act, everything that they have about the encounters having to do with extraterrestrials from Great Britain inclusively. And there is so much information to disseminate that it will take them a full 2 years releasing it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah, and I think other countries have followed suit too, I believe.
Yes.
I had read where Mexico was releasing their files also. And it's just the United States is the only stubborn one.
Well, yeah, but there's purpose and reason why the United States is the only stubborn one. Because the United States perceives that they have the most to lose.
Well, yeah, control.
This is where the closest contact, you know, we're the most powerful nation on the planet, and this is where contact occurred a long time ago.
Yeah, and well, I think if you go back, you know, we can go back as far as the pyramids. I think that E.T. had something to do with them too.
Well, I don't know. You know, I understand what you're saying about that too.
It's a lot of weight.
Read Eric von Däniken, and I understand, you know, what his theories are. But the other night, George Lopez had on his show. Oh my gosh, I feel terrible. I cannot remember the name of the man, but he had a group of people live from Giza in Egypt, an archaeologist and a medium and a researcher that were over there. And I asked the question through the chat box, what his opinion of von Däniken's theories were about aliens being involved in the creation of the pyramids. And he discounted it, and he knows Eric von Däniken. And he said, even though they're good friends, and you know they don't agree on everything. And one of the things he said that there is ample evidence on the site that the pyramids were man-made. I have a lot of trouble accepting that, and I don't know, and I don't think that I'm going to know. I won't have that sufficiently answered for myself until I go to the pyramids, until I feel the energy that is there. And when I'm in that environment, I think I'll have a much stronger sense about what the truth of that is. But I'm not going to, you know, whatever side I come down on, I'm not going to espouse it one way or the other because I simply don't know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, and that's just it. And it's just, I find it so hard that, you know, to believe that they were able to build these things with precision cuts, moving tons and tons of stone, and you know, how? I mean, they didn't hook a basket up to Dino. So
the gentleman that I listened to said it was a system of levers and pulleys.
Yeah, I've heard that too, and you know, I got anything's possible. Like you say, I don't know, but I think
it just seems to me that there's something divine about the pyramids. That is my sense of it. That there is something truly divine about the pyramids, and not just the pyramids in Giza. There are pyramids all over Egypt. There are pyramids all over the world. That, to me, is the most fascinating thing, because these were cultures that certainly didn't intermingle, but everybody seemed to be building the same geometric, three-dimensional form that came to a point and, you know, staring up into the heavens.
Yeah, and it's not like they were getting...
To me, that is significant in its own right, that pyramids in different shapes and forms and sizes appear all over the globe during roughly the same time period, and all serving the same purpose.
Yeah, and it's not like they were able to download the blueprints from the internet.
Exactly. There was no downloading of blueprints. The internet did not exist to our knowledge. But my mother, who's a very, very wise woman, said more knowledge has been lost from this earth than will ever be gained.
I agree, and just think about how much knowledge would be lost if something catastrophic happened again, because what do we use? We've got hard drives, and, you know, all our information, most of it would be wiped away. I mean, we don't have, I guess back in the day they put it in stone, right?
Yes, and that's why I put mine in books.
There you go.
So that I do have something tangible to read, and I am all for those cute little darling readers, you know, the Fires and the Kindles and the this and the that. I'll never own one, because to me there's just nothing as sensuous and as exciting as crawling into bed with a book.
Okay, and well, see, I couldn't use one of those devices anyways, because just looking into a screen and reading for a long period of time, I think would bother me. So I'd rather look at a dull page.
I must agree. I have to agree.
Well,
There's just something about the smell of the paper and the feel of it on your fingers, and it's just it's so real and pure and true.
yeah, and getting back to the whole alien thing, I was hoping.
I knew you were going back there. I thought I had diverted you from that. They'll shut us down in a heartbeat. You know that.
Oh, I know. It happens all the time.
Okay, so if I just disappear, it's not because I hung up on you. It's because someone else did. And I can't tell you if it's terrestrial or extraterrestrial. All I know is that when I get on this subject, I am suddenly subject to interference.
Yeah, I agree. We go through it here too.
Oh, okay, good. All right, so it's not just us. Okay.
Well, I was kind of hoping that a colleague of mine would call in when he heard us talking on this line, because he wrote a book called Letters to Earth, and it's pretty interesting, his take. He goes through, he pretty much brings a scientific understanding to the scriptures. And he talks about, like in the beginning when it talks about Adam and Eve, and how they took a rib from Adam to make Eve. And he points out how it is the first documentation of geoengineering or cloning.
Oh, I know. Isn't that a fascinating theory?
It is.
Oh, if I could go back just for one moment, I would like to identify the gentleman I was speaking of earlier that were on the Dead Air Paranormal show the other night. Is Dr. John Ward and Scotty Roberts, and those are names that you might be familiar with. But you might want to follow up, since you're an inquisitive man, might want to follow up on their theories that are based on their research being done, that has been done and is currently being done at the pyramids, and eminently researchable. I mean, there are so many mysteries connected there. It's just amazing. But anyway, I wanted to identify them since I was quoting them and hadn't given their names. So, okay, you can go back to the other subject now. What was it?
Well, just the documentation that he found within the Bible of alien involvement. He pretty much describes it scientifically as thousands of years of alien involvement, and it's documented.
Well, yeah, but you know what? Here's the problem with that. There are 17 different versions of the Bible. So which Bible are you talking about? Because there are versions of the Bible where if you don't beat your wife, that's aberrant behavior. And then there are versions of the Bible where you're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. And there's no mention of, hatred of homosexuals, and there's no mention of this and that and the other thing that is consistently used to deride and to try to make invisible whole segments of the human population. So when you refer to the Bible, you have to refer specifically to what version, whether it be the Jerusalem Bible or the King James Bible, or which one, because the Jehovah's Witness Bible is a completely different book than the King James Version. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, I absolutely
It's like
see
we've
what you're
taken
saying.
these divine words and we've twisted and manipulated them to suit our own base human purposes. So if you're going to reference it, you have to, say from which school of thought it came.
And that's why I had hoped that he'd call in, because he explains it in a wonderful kind of way. And me personally, I see the Bible, and I know this makes people mad sometimes.
They'll get over it. Go ahead and say what you want to say. Your show, for God's sake.
I see the Bible as a book that man had wrote, and I think we all could agree that we don't trust man. We can't. We can't. So when you go back,
because there are ulterior motives. That's why you can't.
Right.
Because there is always an ulterior motive, and the one that is usually, if not always, the common denominator is greed and power and control.
Absolutely. Now, not to say that everything in the Bible is not true. That I'm not saying. I'm just saying that there are stories that were put into the Bible, and in some sense, I believe it was hundreds of years later after the account, so somebody had to remember what happened or what have you.
Exactly.
And then you had a group of men who sat in a room, and they all had to agree and decide what would go in and what wouldn't. So for me, the Bible's a good starting point, but I think there's more to the big picture, and I think it's good for, you know, you want to start your research out and start there, great. But I think there's more than just that. So.
Well, I'll tell you, you know, we're going to be throwing around some notions about good reading material, fiction or nonfiction. Then what we should do is talk about some of the greatest works of the metaphysicians of the 1800s. If you want something spooky and scary that'll make the hair stand up on the back of your neck, but will also reach right down into your soul and twist you into a different person, then read House of the Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne. If you want to come to terms with the fact that you're responsible for every single decision that you've ever made in your life and every one that you ever will be, then read Emerson's essays, Ralph Waldo Emerson. And if you want to be completely and wholly in touch spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, sensually, in every conceivable way, then read Walden by Henry David Thoreau. And they will, if assimilated properly into your consciousness, become as important to you as the Bible.
Right, absolutely. And, you know, I guess my only point is that I don't feel like the Bible is the full picture. I think there's more. Why did they leave anything out? We should have it all. I don't care how thick it is. Look at how thick our phone books used to be. So, you know, give us the whole story. I want it all.
Yeah, give us the whole story, even if it's as big as the New York City phone book. Which borough?
Absolutely.
I think Brooklyn's got the biggest, fattest one. I do believe. I can give you my Brooklyn accent. I can give you my Bronx accent. I can give you my Manhattan accent. Which one do you want?
I'll take either or. I'm from New York, believe it or not.
Are you? Now, I wouldn't have known that for a second. I would never have guessed that you were originally from New York. How did you get rid of it?
I don't know. I'm kind of surprised to hear that I've gotten rid of it.
Oh yeah. Oh no.
Yeah.
It's undetectable.
Well, I'm from
Absolutely
Rochester, New York, so I think it's not as deep there as in New York City.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah. So that could be it. And I've lived in the South now for the last 6 years, so.
Well, that's not long enough. You're not a Southerner unless you've been down here for a full generation.
That's right. So, yeah, they call me a transplant.
Yeah, and if you move into New England and you weren't, from the Mayflower, then you don't belong. Talk about provincial. You think it's provincial down here?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, we're up for one more break here, and then I want to come back, and you and I will finish up. So,
okay.
And I'll give you, and I hope you've enjoyed tonight's show. It's been pretty interesting, and we're not quite done yet. If you want to call in and talk with Andrea, 803-317-2264, and she's going to be with us for just a few more minutes. And we do have a call, Andrea. We've got...
Okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We've got, well, as soon as my screen lets me see, we've got 704 area code. Where are you calling from? And first name, please.
My name's Wayne. I'm calling from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Hi, Wayne. Welcome aboard.
Hi, Wayne.
Yeah. Hey, hello. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you, dear?
I'm doing okay. I've got a question. I had an experience. It's been about a year ago, and I've really been trying to seek answers about what this meant or what it was. Just to briefly tell you about it, one night I'm sound asleep on my couch, and it's about 3 a.m. in the morning, and I was awakened, and I had the strange feeling that someone was in the room. I was actually laying facing to the back of the couch, and when I rolled over, I had a little piano stool just a few feet away from the couch. There's this lady sitting on this piano stool, leaned in, and her face was maybe no more than 2 feet from mine, and she looked oriental, but she had these strange looking tattoo-like objects on both cheeks. I mean, they almost looked like swirls, but they resembled cat whiskers in some way. Well, anyway, I look into to this person's eyes or whatever, and my immediate reaction was, oh my God, or wow, or whatever. And then I think to myself, okay, I've got to be dreaming. So I thought, well, if I just close my eyes and roll back over, I'll go back to sleep, and I won't have to deal with this. And so I turned my head back and laid back down and kept my eyes closed for several minutes. It felt like maybe 5, and I thought, okay, well, I'll take a peek and see if she's still here. As I rolled over, she's still sitting there, leaned in, and it was almost as if she had a question that she wanted to ask me. And so this second time, I wasn't disturbed, but I was still wondering, but I didn't really feel like I should engage whatever this was. So once again, I rolled back over and took a few minutes. And when I turned back, she's still there. And this went on for, it seemed to be a good 20, 30 minutes. And finally, I got no communication whatsoever. I didn't really have a feeling of peace, nor a feeling of chaos. But finally, I rolled back over and I forced myself to go back to sleep. And the next morning I woke up and I felt a little bit different, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Do you have any insights, any ideas about what this could have been or what it meant?
Chances are really good that what you experienced was an interdimensional encounter. And even though you were able to see her, it's highly likely that she was just revisiting a place in mind from her own realm and was not even cognizant of your presence in the room. I can't say that for certain. Obviously, I was not there. But that you felt no threat from her, that she felt completely benign, meant that she was not aware of you. Because had she been aware of you, she would have probably had one reaction or another, either a negative reaction like "you're in my space, get out," or "welcome to my space, don't you like it?" I find that encounters with the spirits go mostly one way, but sometimes the other. But if they're not even aware of you, and we had spirits in the house, we had a father, a son, and a dog that would appear not routinely, but I would guess about 4 or 5 times over the course of the 10 years that we lived there. I saw them standing at the head of the stairs in my bedroom. And my reaction would be to turn and run back down the stairs because, of course, they were translucent. I could have walked right through them. I did not want to. It just seemed the inappropriate thing to do. So instead, I would go back downstairs, complain to my mother that they're standing up at the top of the stairs again, and by the time she would come to investigate with me, they would be gone. They never made eye contact, including the dog, and they never indicated that they were doing anything other than looking out the back window of my bedroom, as if they were surveying the property. They never acknowledged me, even though I saw them. So I guess the only thing that I can tell you is that if you had this experience, consider yourself graced and blessed that you were able to encounter spirit in such a way. Chances are really good that what you visited with that night was a sense memory from spirit.
Okay. Well, look, I do appreciate your time and your input.
You're very welcome, dear. Thank you so much for calling into the show and listening in tonight.
Yeah,
okay, thank you very much.
All right, have a good night,
bye,
my
Wayne.
friend. And again, thank you for the call. That's interesting. And that's what I mean, if everybody can have that type of experience. I mean, Wayne had that experience. He knows it's real. And, the attitude I take on it with my personal experiences is I'll share them with you. And if you don't believe me, then don't believe me. I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't believe me, then don't believe me. Some people can't wrap their mind around the notion, but I firmly believe that if one of us can have this kind of contact, then all of us can. That it is not something that, a lot of mediums will say, oh, no, we have very, very specific gifts. Well, if they have it, we all have it. It's to the extent that it's developed that is the line of demarcation.
That's right. That's how I feel. I think that we're all born with it. It's just as a baby, we're told no, 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 you can't do this,
Yep.
can't do that, and some of us fall out of it. And,
Yeah, but I think that we're all born pure, innocent spirit, and then depending on what we are exposed to, depending on how we assimilate the information that we're exposed to, that's how we develop our spirituality. And some of it is just based on pure indoctrination. Some of it is based on, you're a Southern Baptist, your mama was a Southern Baptist, your grandma's a Southern Baptist, you're going to be a Southern Baptist, this is what you're going to believe. Your grandmother was Catholic, your grandfather was Catholic, you are going to be born and raised Catholic, period. This is what you are going to believe. And what that does is, or Jewish or Buddhist or, whatever, it doesn't matter. Religion is passed on in a familial way, and it is indoctrination. Even the religious zealots will admit that it is indoctrination. It is a form of teaching and repetition, so that when you've repeated the creed 100 times and it is ingrained in your consciousness, you can say it in your sleep, and then it becomes a prayer, and it becomes part of who you are. It is assimilated into your character. When you are brave enough to kick down the walls of the boxes that are created for you in childhood or that you create for yourself in adulthood, when you dare to think bigger than you are, is when great spiritual enlightenment occurs.
I agree. I want to give you an opportunity here. We still got, another 15 minutes if you want it, but give you an opportunity to maybe tell us what your story, your experiences, what that's done for you, where you are today with it all, how you cope with it, and maybe, give out any links, any appearances you've got that you'd like to talk about, whatever.
I will tell you, and I will close out with you tonight telling you that from the age of 12, I have known that there is something beyond our mortal existence. I still don't know precisely what it is. And if my family doesn't know, then nobody does. And if anybody out there claims that they are the end-all, be-all authority on this subject, then they are living in bad faith, lying to themselves, and being fraudulent with their followers. That's first and foremost. Second of all, I will say that because of the experience that I had at such a tender age, I have been able to live my life fearlessly, having no fear of death. I have moments where I might fear pain and don't want to die painfully, but I will say that I know that I'm moving on somewhere, and that everything that I have gained and learned and felt and touched and experienced in my life will somehow be imprinted on my soul and will travel with me. And therefore, my life is not wasted on this planet. And the other thing that I can say is that if you are fearful, then that makes you human. And when you develop the capacity to embrace and love your own fear, it will dissipate into the ether as if it is nothing but thin air, because that's all that fear is. It is powerless. We are the ones who imbue it with its power.
Very well said. Very well said. So, websites and any kind of links that you want to get out, and anything along those lines.
I have the most beautiful page on Facebook, my personal page. Everybody says it's just gorgeous. If you're into looking at the world every day from 1,000 different perspectives, seeing gorgeous photography, listening to fabulous classical music and new age music, and reading brilliant quotations from some of the greatest minds that have ever lived, please feel free to jump on and send me a friend request. I also have an author page on Facebook, and the page I am most proud of that has the most incredible creative material on it is A World Awakening, which is my show with George Lopez. And he's created some videos there that are stunning. So I invite everybody to go visit us there and to tune in to our broadcast at 9 o'clock on Tuesday nights on Blog Talk Radio. The other thing that I would invite people to do is to go visit my website, which is easy to remember. It's houseofdarknesshouseoflight.com. And I have 2 YouTube channels, and if you just Google my name, you can hang out with me in cyberspace endlessly.
All right. Well.
Oh, yes. Oh, your friend Bill Bean?
Yes.
I'm going to be with him at Phenomicon in Gettysburg. Are you going?
Oh, nice. No, I probably won't get there for financial reasons, but sounds interesting.
Well, since you're the one that brought him up tonight, and George looked it up for me and told me that he was going to be there, then I'm going to have a little discussion with him, I think. So I'll tell him that you send your regards.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Maybe sometime after you two meet, and maybe sometime we can get you both on the show and kind of...
Sure. That's a great idea.
Share
Bring us on
experiences.
simultaneously, and then you can just sit back for 2 hours and listen.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Right. God, it's a beautiful night tonight.
Yeah, it's nice
beautiful.
here, too. Really nice. So, Andrea, thank you so much for telling your story. And now you're not being bothered by entities these days, correct?
Honey, I'm not bothered by anything.
Good.
I'm the happiest person you'll ever meet, and probably one of the sanest. And that in its own right is scary.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. And I do thank you for speaking out about this, and not everybody will when they have these kinds of things happen.
No,
yeah.
They won't. And who could blame them? The kind of scrutiny that you get put under, it's like being, under an electron microscope when you come out of the closet. But you know what? The fact is, every one of the family members all say the same thing, all 7 of us. I don't give a damn anymore. I don't care who says what.
Amen.
Doesn't matter.
Well,
the story is more important than the criticism.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Because for everybody who throws stones at you, there's 10 more people who just want to learn. So
that's right. Absolutely. So you know what? Be the light you seek.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I'm going to put your links up on our links page on latenightinthemidlands.com, and we'll keep them there. And I look forward to having you back in the future. I've enjoyed talking with you tonight.
I have as well, Michael. It's been absolutely delightful, and you know how to reach me. Be in touch anytime.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and have a great weekend.
You too, honey.
All right. Bye-bye.
Good night, and good night to your listeners.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, everybody. That was Andrea and, Andrea Perrin, that is. Was ghosts. I think they were much worse than that, and I am putting in the wrong number. So, we've talked to Bill Bean in the past, and he went through quite an ordeal in Maryland. And I'll tell you now, he's a very, very spiritual man. So it definitely turned him around. I wonder what it's done for Andrea. And we'll find out in just a minute, because I'm calling her now. George Norrie must love having those people doing all that stuff for him.
Hello?
Hello, Andrea. This is Michael Vera with Late Night in the Midlands. How are you?
I'm very well, Michael. How are you, dear?
I am doing fine, and I hope you're ready to roll.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Do you want to call me on a landline, or do you feel that the connection's good with my cell phone?
Right now, it sounds great. So unless we have a problem, unless you want to switch, that's totally up to you.
Nope, this is fine. Let me give you the other number, just in case, for any reason.
Well, hold on. We're on the air now, so don't do that. But I already have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hi.
Well, hello.
Yes, let me not give my phone number out on the air.
Yeah, absolutely. I had to cut in there. That's about the only time I'll get rude and interrupt.
Bless your heart.
Well,
How are you tonight?
I am doing fine, and I want to thank you so much for taking time out to be with us tonight.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I watched the movie. I don't know, it might have been 2 months ago now, and I'll tell you, wow, what a movie! And I'm looking forward to getting into this with you tonight. And I thought maybe we could start out with you giving a little bit of background and maybe giving us the story.
Well, let me tell you, I do not want to rupture your bubble. I don't, and I understand why you enjoyed the movie. I'm sure many millions of people have, based on the turnout at the theaters worldwide to see it. It is predominantly fiction. The real story is much more intense than anything that they even attempted to depict on screen. And the portrayal of Bathsheba Sherman is virtually fully fictionalized. From the year that she supposedly killed her child in 1863, when the real Bathsheba was already close to being an elderly woman, certainly for her time was an elderly woman. She was born in 1812. So the depiction of her as a witch, and there's no proof anywhere that Bathsheba was a practicing witch. That was all based on rumor and innuendo. However, I will give you the other side of the coin, Michael. Okay. Mrs. Warren walked into our kitchen blind, did not know when she and Ed came the first time to investigate what was happening at the farm. She had no idea of any of the history, any personalities, past or present, that were attached to the property. And when she came in the kitchen, she said, "I sense a malignant presence. Her name's Bathsheba." Wow. So that's where that comes from in the film, because the film is based on the case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren. I did provide a great deal of substantive information to the producers. Of course, I wanted it to be as authentic as possible, and yet there's not a single scene in the film passed on family members. I tell my mother I get to visit with her sister and her brother far more frequently in their death than I ever got to in life. The other day, I was just dusting the antique organ in our parlor, and I felt my Uncle John, who passed away about a month ago, just came right beside me, and I knew it was him instantly because he wore the same cologne for 58 years. So I knew it was him because of the times I tucked my head into his neck and smelled him as much as I held him. So, you know, those moments are so precious to me. They're so comforting to me. I don't understand why anybody would be afraid of something like that. I can't even comprehend it.
Well, I guess it's not that I would be afraid of. It's the ones that show up and they look like undertakers, and they're standing at the end of your bed. Now, I've talked with, I don't know if you're familiar with Bill Bean, but he grew up in a home in Maryland, and it had demonic entities in it. And I mean, you know, his stories, I couldn't imagine waking up in the middle of the night and here's this undertaker looking character with black eyes standing at the end of the bed. I think I'd have a heart attack. So, well,
if that's the angel of death come upon you, then that would be bad.
Yeah.
That would be bad. Yes, no, I don't know Bill Bean personally, but I have heard some of his tales from the crypt, as it were.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have to say that I think that he would agree with me completely when I make the comment that once you are touched by spirit, it's a gift that you cannot return. I say that to people all the time because I want it to sink into their consciousness. Once you are touched by spirit, it is a gift you can never return. Now, you can turn your back on it. You can pretend that it doesn't exist. But the fact is that once the third eye has been pried wide open or has been gracefully opened with just sheer acceptance. However it happens, when it happens, nothing is ever the same again, ever. You never think about things in life. The world ceases to be three-dimensional, and it becomes multidimensional. And the earth ceases to be the earth. It becomes part of the cosmos in a way that integrates it with everything. It changes your mindset, your frequency, your vibration, the wavelength on which you think, on which you project your thoughts. Once you go there, once you have been touched by spirit, and you know there's no mistaking it for something else, when that happens, everything changes.
And, you know, I have to agree with you 100% because I've had some experiences of my own. One was a haunted apartment that I lived in, but the real one that did it for me was a visit from my mother who passed away. And it was real.
Oh, I'm so sorry you lost your mom, honey. I'm so sorry.
Well,
but you know you didn't really lose her. You do know that. Please tell me you know she's still with you.
Oh, absolutely. I know it. I know that when I'm done here on this planet, I'll see her again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, but it was very real, and I had confirmation that it was real because there was things she told me that came true the days to follow. So, you know, that was my confirmation for it all. So I knew I didn't lose my mind. And for me, that did a lot. And when she came, she did tell me, she says, tell your father there is a God. So, you know, for those people, my guest, her name is Andrea Purin. She is the eldest daughter of Roger and Carolyn Purin. And I do believe I'm getting that last name right. We'll see. I haven't struck out yet this week, folks. She says she has 4 sisters, Nancy, Christine, Cynthia, and April. She was born in October of 1958 and the only one of 5 siblings to be born in Rhode Island. She was just 2 months old when her parents bought their first home in William Dack, I guess, Connecticut, where all of her sisters came into the world. A family required more space, so they wound up. And let me just tell you, this is like set up where she's talking, you know, in this bio, it says, I am the eldest daughter. So I've got to switch it around as I tell you about her. So keep that in mind here. So I'm doing the best I can. So anyways, they needed more space and required a bigger house. So they bought a larger home in Cumberland, Rhode Island. She says when she was 6, living in a suburb of Providence proved disquieting. After 6 years, her mother decided her and the girls required a place in the country in which to grow and thrive. Well, in June of 1970, she found a glorious farm. And, then her and her father and siblings moved mountains to buy what was known as the Arnold Estate. 200 acres of land with a big barn and a farmhouse. Plenty of space to spread out and explore nature. It was the perfect place to raise a family, she says. According to the owner, it was a perfect place as well, though he failed to disclose a crucial element of the experience he endured as an occupant. She says, the day we moved in, he told my father, leave the lights on at night. A rather cryptic message. Now, I got to say, if I've just bought a home from you and you hand me the keys and you tell me keep the lights on at night, you're not leaving until we have a conversation. I want to know why you said that. Anyways, thus began an incredible odyssey, a supernatural excursion through dimensions of time and space as the history of its characters from the ages began to reveal themselves to through seven mortals who could not conceive of and never anticipated such events transpiring in their lives. So they had quite an ordeal in that house, and I'm looking forward to talking to her about it. I apologize, folks, but the bio was, it was kind of like her talking, so I had to switch it around to me talking. But she's supposed to call in a few minutes, but I might just go ahead and give it a shot here and see if I could just bring her on now, because we're close enough. But she was on the road tonight too, so hopefully everything works out well. Let's see. So I'm going to get her on with us now, and we'll talk about this. You know, I couldn't imagine living in a house with that kind of, it's one thing to have ghosts. It's another thing. I don't think what she had.
That comes directly from the books, because they decided that the whole real true story that's written in the books was far too intense for society at large. And for the first time, I think, in Hollywood history, they toned down a movie instead of building it up to be more than it was.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've heard of plenty of cases where they've added things into a movie to make it more scary or more dramatic. I never heard of them toning it down. So then you must have had one hell of an ordeal.
Well, the producers said that the actual true story was literally unbelievable, that they couldn't portray it as being based on a true story if they actually produced it as it was. And I can't imagine what CGI exists. I can't imagine what process might exist that would be able to actually duplicate what we saw in the house. It was really beyond imagination. I tried to describe it to the best of my ability in the actual books, but, in the big picture got it right. The Conjuring is an extraordinary film. I think of it as an art film, not as a horror film. I didn't find a single scene of that film to be in any way horrifying. In some ways, I found it very emotional, sometimes very disturbing, particularly when Lily Taylor is on her knees, trembling with the match in her hand, screaming my name to come help her, because that did happen.
Wow. And when I watch a movie like that, what I try to do is I try to put myself in that situation. And, I love true stories. Those are my favorite. And I'll tell you, it was very intriguing. It kept me on the edge of my seat the entire time. And I thought, wow, can you imagine literally going through that? Now, I've been in a haunted house where I've been messed with by ghosts, but never actually seen them. I couldn't imagine an apparition just appearing in the room like that.
What do you think your fascination is, Michael? If you actually haven't seen a ghost, sorry, I'm going into my interviewer mode here. If you haven't actually seen a ghost, what is it that compels you to the supernatural? What's the attraction?
The attraction is knowing what comes after this. That's what it's all about.
You get the gold star.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's why anybody who pursues any interest in the paranormal or supernatural is trying to verify for themselves, in my opinion, that there is indeed something beyond our mortal existence. And that is reason enough to explore it.
Exactly. I mean, that's what drives me. It's just to know for sure. I mean, how satisfactory would that be when you do get to your deathbed to just, people have told you their stories and there's so much good evidence towards it, but, there's nothing like seeing to believe it.
Well, I had the privilege of that happening to me, and a lot of people are right now going, poor word choice, Andrea. No, it was a privilege to see a full-body apparition at the age of 12 years old. I began to process that notion immediately, and I realized in short order that there is something beyond our mortal existence. To this day, I cannot tell you exactly what it is, but it is, and that's what matters.
And now, if I got this right, it's been a little while since I've watched the movie, but if I got this right, then the entities that were showing up in that home, they actually at one time lived there. They had a history there on that property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and my mother always thought that that was the case. She said right from the inception, when she started to identify the activity in the house, that these were not simply spirits that were passing through the property, that they were somehow attached to it, that it somehow belonged to them, and that the only way that we would ever identify them, and because there were numerous spirits, we wanted to identify who we were either witnessing or interacting with. And so she began about a 2-year journey where she lived in dusty archives and, visited town halls, went all the way to Worcester, Massachusetts, went as far south as Providence, dug up all the records, the death records, the birth certificates, everything that she could find about people that were in any way attached to the Arnold estate, which prior to that was the Richardson estate. The Richardson family is the ones that built it and finished it as it is now in 1736. So, you see, when we moved in there, 8 generations of one extended family had lived and died on that property. And my mother was quite certain that some of them had never left. And so what she did was she began an ordeal, a very painstaking process of piecing together this extremely elaborate puzzle. And in doing so, she was able, I think, to identify some of the spirits that lived in that house and some that died in that house, and for whatever reason did not move on. But one of the things that we found out that was so interesting is that most of the spirits had either died traumatically or very suddenly and did not seem to know that they were dead, or the other ones had died by their own hands. And so there were several spirits that we interacted with in that house that had claimed their own lives. And, I can only speculate about it, but I think that the notion of suicide, committing suicide, even to this day, is so taboo. It's so frowned upon in terms of, religious doctrine and dogma. It is, think about how indoctrinated into that thought, that mindset people were 200 years ago, 250 years ago. It was flat out a sin to kill yourself. If you did, you were going to burn in hell for eternity. So I speculate that some of the spirits in the house are staying there because they're afraid to cross over, because they were told that they will not go to the light, that they will instead be enveloped by the darkness. And so it is safer and it is more predictable to remain in some way in this realm and earthbound.
Hey, that is about the best explanation I think I've ever heard as far as why some of these entities are stuck in homes or buildings or what have you. That makes a lot of sense. They've killed themselves, and they're afraid to cross over because they've been told they're going to burn in hell.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right. And if they were fearful enough, really, Michael, what it all comes down to, all of it comes down to fear. I mean, can you imagine an emotion being so powerful that you feel it after you die?
Oh, God.
That's what would have to be in place for that hypothesis to be plausible.
Yeah, that's pretty scary to think about. I mean, really, because I've joked around several times about, well, when I die, I hope that I don't want things, and then you can't have them. And
right.
I kind of see some of these ghosts as maybe that's the case. They don't want to leave things or attached to them in some way.
Well, and I think that there are many benign spirits that remain attached in one form or another. I have numerous encounters on a regular basis with